We all need food for thought, and today we've brought Microsoft's Chris Perkins and award-winning disability specialist Shani Dhanda together to chat over lunch. They talk about inclusion, ableism, employment and technology.
I did some research on you and read a blog that you'd written about your disability journey. And one of the things that I read was that growing up, you were less willing to sort of accept your disability, but as you grow into adult life, you've embraced it.
I grew up in a big South Asian community. I'm Sikh. I follow Sikhism as a religion, and culturally I'm Punjabi. But I'm also British. So as you can tell, there's a lot going on there. And as I've grown up, I feel a real sense of conflict about it all. Like sometimes I feel like I'm never British enough, or when I go to India and visit my family, they don't see me as Indian, and it's kind of like, well, who am I? Where do I fit in? And then throw disability identity into that mix, and it's a lot to process. So I think if you had met the 20-year-old version of me, I wanted, nothing to do with my disability, nothing to do with my disability identity. In the South Asian community, disability faces an even further sense of stigma. People just have different expectations for me, much lower expectations for me compared to perhaps their own children or, other children that were the same age. Even though I'm very able and capable to do so many things, I might need to do them in a different way. But I think I realised from a young age is people treat me differently. I feel like I was very infantilised as well, within the community. Life's difficult. I live in a world that isn't designed for me, and I just didn't see anything good about owning that word disability, so just wanted to get away from it. But then I was at university and I accidentally stumbled across the social model of disability, and that's where things really changed for me. So the social model talks about how it's not our conditions and impairments that disable us. Actually, it's society and the way in which it's designed. It could be physical barriers, cultural barriers, attitudinal barriers, or it could be people's bias. I essentially experience disability. I'm not disabled 24/7. I only experience disability when I'm faced with a barrier or a bias. And then I thought, okay, this makes so much sense to me. If I can get this out to other people and help them learn about it, then it would mean that other disabled people didn't have to have those same negative experiences that I had. And because, have you ever heard of the term internalized ableism?
No, tell us more.
So ableism is a concept to describe the discrimination and social prejudice that disabled people face. It's a very lesser known ism. You've got racism, sexism, ageism, but it means that we as disabled people internalise all of those views that society, the negative perceptions and stereotypes that society has about disabled people. So now I think I'm a very proud disabled person, and I want to help others to own that identity, because it's exhausting spending your life trying to downplay something, but it's something you can actually be proud of and take pride in. I think the best way to spot ableism is to replace the situation with gender or race. So, for example, if buildings made it impossible for women to enter, that would be sexist, right? But the fact that it happens today to disabled people means that it's ableist. I think we live in a really ableist society, and that's what I'm trying to change.
Understand. That's one of the things that really struck me about your blog was that you highlighted that very often it's the biases and the blockers imposed by other individuals or organisations that is a bigger issue than the disability itself, and the disability only becomes an issue when you're sort of confronted by, say, an obstacle or a bias imposed by others. So is that part of your motivation to sort of challenge that and to seek change in society and employers and across communities at large?
Yeah, and I think people say to me, why do disabled people face so much oppression? Why do they face so much discrimination? And I think we have to remember that it wasn't actually that long ago that disabled people were still being institutionalised in this country. It became illegal to discriminate someone against disability 20 and 30 years after it was illegal to discriminate people on their gender identity or their racial identity. So we've never ever had a level playing field or a level footing. We've always been playing catch up, and if we look back at disability history, we had to really fight for those rights. And it's a huge privilege for me to sit here and have this conversation with you, and it's because of all the previous disability campaigners and activists and all the work that they did that I can even be sitting here today, you know, doing the work that I'm doing, taking up the space that I take up. So there's lots of different reasons, I think, why we as disabled people still have to fight for our rights, but we have very low representation. If we just think about the stats, you know, there's 14.6 million disabled people. That's at least 22% of the population. That's 1 in 5 of us. But when we think about like representation, I personally believe that we as disabled people are either portrayed as benefit cheats or we all want to be Paralympians. And that's not reality. Like, we're missing so much in between those very extreme, you know, versions.
So do you think that if people with a disability sometimes limit their own opportunity or have a belief system that limits their courage and opportunity to go and find? So on one hand, it's important to work with employers and other organisations to open up and create opportunity.
Absolutely. I think even if you're a non-disabled person, we're all prone to having self-limiting beliefs, right? And then when you live in a society that constantly views you as less than, or if we employ you, you might not be as productive, or if we employ you, you're going to cost us a lot of money, of course, and it is natural to internalise those beliefs. And then if I just talk about me, my identities, yes, I experience disability. I'm also a woman, and I'm also a person of colour. So there's a lot to contend with. There's a lot of barriers to fight, and sadly, there's a lot of things to prove to people. Like, and I don't want to really have to spend my time trying to prove my worth. I just want people to know it and to not make assumptions and judgments about me and about other disabled people. And I think I really experienced that when I tried to enter the workforce. So at 16, I was applying for part-time work, and I had one sentence on my covering letter that said, you know, I've got a condition, but it doesn't affect my ability to do this role. And I never heard anything back.
Really? Okay.
And I couldn't understand that. It got to the point I'd applied for over 100 jobs and not one person got back to me. And I wanted to work. I was very capable of working. I wanted to start my life, because at 16, my health had just sort of stabilised.
Yeah.
So I just took that one sentence off my covering letter and I got an interview straight away.
I know, certainly as someone who's worked at Microsoft for many years, I've been very inspired actually by not just our focus on our mission statement, but also on our cultural values, which really focus, as well as focusing on our customers and doing right by them, really focusing on the importance of teamwork and being a diverse and inclusive employer. I think we work very hard to make sure we are making good decisions about representation and inclusion in the organisation.
I think for every employer, I think they really need to understand that disabled talent is so untapped out there. There's an unemployment crisis amongst the disability community. We live in the face of additional extra costs. I added up all of my extra costs last year and it came to over £13,000.
Wow, okay.
So I have to earn enough money first to offset all these extra costs before I can even worry about paying my rent and my utility bills, which have all gone up for everybody. We are twice as likely to be unemployed. We have to apply for 60% more jobs. And I wish I could sit here and say, when I was 16, I struggled to get into employment, but it's not like that now. It's still like that. There are people with PhDs that are highly educated that can't even get a job just because of this perceived stigma and fear that disabled people might cost more money to employ. That's not the case. That we may take more time off. That's not the case. Actually, research out there shows that all of these myths are exactly that. They're just myths. We're actually way more loyal, and I think that's because we're so grateful just to have a job. we actually overcompensate when we're in the role. We're as productive as other employees. What we really need is for people to understand if there are any barriers in the workplace, what are them and how do you remove them? Because what I often find is the wrong type of questions are being asked. Really, all we should be asking is what are the barriers and how can we as the employer remove them?
Understand.
But because every decision that we make either can raise or lower barriers to participation in society, but also in the workplace. Look at the barriers that I face just trying to get into the workforce. And then disabled people not only struggle to get in work, but then stay in work as well. And now, like, I'm 35 years old, I'm worrying about, well, how long will I be able to work for because of my health? So it's kind of like, there's this constant worry, it's constant fight. So I think if employers just really lent into that discomfort, face that fear, got over it, I just think organisations need to understand the real lived experience of disabled people, get over your fear, employ us, we're bloody brilliant, and design products and services for us, because we have a huge spending power. It's 13 trillion globally. So I would rather spend that money with a business or a retailer that values me as a consumer and has thought about my needs.
That's right.
Simple.
That's right. That's right. And actually, maybe that brings us on to this topic, because obviously we talked this morning about the increased costs that you're exposed to. So tell us more about the work you do with the is it diversity and what it sets out to do.
Growing up, I felt a huge amount of guilt at all the extra costs that my parents faced. Then, as an adult, started to face those extra costs myself. And I was at uni enjoying student discount, and I was like, well, why can't disabled people have a discount? So I had this idea. I was like, right, I want to, help reduce disabled people's outgoings, because disabled people have a lot of barriers to economic participation.
I mean, we at Microsoft, we celebrate Purple Light Up Day here. In fact, this building here, lit up with purple lights, just to support that message about this. Notwithstanding the challenge you describe, the cost of living, but actually let's not overlook also the spending power of people with disability. After all, if there are 1 billion people with disabilities around the world, that's collectively, there's spending power, their economic contribution there, right? And it's great that you find that way to connect retailers, service providers to that opportunity, but in a way that delivers a benefit back to people with disability and tries to bring some of those costs down. Because you do have this unique challenge, this extra cost of living that others perhaps don't.
When I've sat with people, CEOs and retailers, businesses, they get it, and actually their jaws are on the floor. They're like, oh, we've been going after students. There's only 2-3 million students, but there's nearly 50 million disabled people in this country alone. And actually, it's a real moment of consciousness for them of who they've been overlooking, and willingness on their part that, we want to do it, but then kicks in this huge sense of fear. Because there are some amazing retailers out there that have already done some great things. And when I've sat there and said, well, why haven't you shouted about this? Why haven't you done any press? But we're really scared. We're scared that we're going to get backlash. Perhaps we didn't do it properly, or perhaps all of our stores aren't yet accessible. And I'm like, well, is your intent to one day be accessible and be fully inclusive? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I said, well, that's okay, because this is a journey. And of course, we would love to click our fingers and everything for all the barriers to be gone, but that's not reality. At the end of the day, they need to be brave, they need to be bold, they need to understand this is going to bring them commercial benefit, but ultimately, and the most important point is that it's the right thing to do, and it's going to help us as disabled people. I
think it's a great message to organisations to be more open about the good work they're perhaps doing behind the scenes. Or, first of all, to take action, positive action, but then also to be confident to talk about it. And it's a good point you made, that except that, yes, okay, someone will find something to criticise in that, or it won't be a perfect story, or it won't necessarily show up in every dimension of the enterprise today. But these organisations are on a journey, and so have the confidence to speak to that.
And no one's perfect, and no organisation is perfect, and it's human nature to make mistakes, and we are all going to do that. We all have done that, And it's okay for an organisation to admit that too.
That's right. That's right. Well, listen, at Microsoft, our mission statement is to empower every person, every organisation on the planet to achieve more. And recognising there's 1 billion people on the planet with a disability, we particularly focus on how we can bring technology to everybody, make it accessible. We've spoken about that this morning. But the thing about wanting to empower people to do more is that that's a never-ending journey, more and more and more and more. It's been great to talk to you this morning. There've been so many, I think, important messages there. You talked to first of all about the experience of growing up, just the inherent maybe prejudice in employers when they see that someone is disabled and make assumptions about what that might mean in terms of a gap between the job and the person's ability to deliver, and the need to sort of just remove that prejudice. And I think that's a great call to action for employers, just to think deeply about what's the role that we need, and is candidates capable of delivering that. And by the way, if we make some sensible adjustments and or provide good accessible technology, then that should create a great opportunity. I think your point around encouraging organisations just to have the courage to talk about what the positive action they're taking around disability is so important, having the courage to do that. And I think representing, and not overlooking the kind of economic contribution of people with disability, and acting on behalf of consumers, but also advocating. So you've uncovered some tremendous sort of themes for us in the discussion this morning. Before we close out, is there any final thoughts or message you'd like to convey?
There's a lot, really. What can I say to keep it concise? I think my message for other organisations and businesses would be to really lean into that discomfort, if there is any, around disability inclusion, because once you do that, it's going to take you on this amazing journey, and it's going to make you a way more resilient and productive and profitable organisation. And what are you in business for? To make money. So it makes great sense all round. Just lean into that fear.
Lean into it, that's great. What a great message to finish on. Shani, listen, thank you very much indeed for spending time with us here at Microsoft today.
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon. Thank you.